The house had never felt so quiet, yet so full at the same time. It was the kind of quiet that settled deep into the walls, the floors, even the air itself. The kind that came after days of noise, machines, voices, instructions, and constant movement. The kind of quiet that only arrived after something life-changing had happened. A new life had entered the world, and everything else seemed to slow down to make room for it. The woman lay back on the reclined hospital stretcher that had been carefully wheeled up the driveway and positioned near the front of the house. She looked exhausted, her face pale, her eyes heavy, but there was a softness there that had not existed before. Her arms were wrapped around a tiny bundle of blankets, holding her newborn close to her chest. The baby slept peacefully, unaware of anything beyond warmth, heartbeat, the familiar comfort of being held. This was supposed to be a calm moment, a moment to breathe, a moment to finally be home. The pregnancy had not been easy. There had been sleepless nights, worried conversations, and endless appointments. There were days when the weight of responsibility felt overwhelming, days when fear crept in quietly, disguised as simple concern. But all of that had faded the second the baby arrived. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not stress, not rules, not other people's opinions. Just the baby. The neighborhood itself was one of those carefully planned, suburban areas where everything looked neat and organized. Lawns trimmed just right. Driveways clean. Houses painted in soft, neutral colors. It was the kind of place that looked perfect from the outside. The kind people believed was peaceful simply because it appeared that way the couple had chosen this neighborhood. Years earlier, because it felt safe, predictable, quiet, they believed it would be a good place to raise a family. At the time, the presence of a homeowners association had seemed like a small price to pay for order and cleanliness. Rules about trash bins, lawn height, parking, nothing that felt unreasonable, at least, not back then. The transport team moved slowly and carefully, making sure the stretcher stayed steady as they positioned it. The woman winced slightly as she shifted, adjusting her grip on the baby. Her body was still sore, still healing, still catching up with what it had just been through. But she did not complain. Her focus never left the small face pressed against her chest. The man stood nearby, watching every movement closely. He did not hover, but he was always within arm's reach. His posture was calm, his expression controlled, but there was a quiet alertness in his eyes. He listened to the instructions, thanked the medical staff, and made sure everything was set before they left. When the stretcher was finally locked in place and the last nurse gave a gentle smile and a few parting words, the driveway felt even quieter than before. Just the family, just the moment. For a brief time, it felt perfect. The woman exhaled slowly, leaning her head back for a second. She closed her eyes, listening to the soft sounds of the neighborhood, a bird somewhere nearby, a distant lawnmower, the quiet hum of a normal day continuing as if nothing monumental had just happened. She opened her eyes again and looked down at the baby. Her lips curved into a small smile. This was home. This was where their child would grow, where first steps would happen, where birthdays would be celebrated. She did not see the figure approaching from down the sidewalk at first. It was just a presence at the edge of the driveway. Someone standing a little too still, a little too focused. The man noticed first. His eyes shifted briefly, taking in the movement without changing his expression. He recognized the posture instantly, upright, rigid, arms crossed tightly against the chest. The woman approaching was dressed neatly, almost too neatly for a casual afternoon. Her hair was styled carefully, her clothes pressed and clean. She walked with purpose, each step sharp and deliberate. Like she had rehearsed the path in her mind. She stopped near the edge of the driveway, close enough to see clearly, far enough to establish control. Her gaze moved from the stretcher to the baby, then to the woman holding the child. Her lips tightened slightly. The man stepped forward a little, placing himself naturally between the stretcher and the approaching figure. Not aggressively, not defensively, just enough to create space. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice even, The woman did not answer right away. She looked past him, her eyes narrowing as she took in the scene. The hospital stretcher, the medical equipment, the vehicle parked temporarily in the driveway. "This is not permitted," she said finally. Her tone was sharp, clipped as if she were reading from a list she had memorized long ago. The man blinked once. "Excuse me?" She raised a hand slightly, gesturing toward the driveway. "Hospital equipment. Commercial vehicles. Temporary obstructions. All of that violates community guidelines." The woman on the stretcher shifted uncomfortably. Confusion flickered across her face. She tightened her hold on the baby instinctively. "I just got home from the hospital," she said softly, her voice tired but polite. "I gave birth." The HOA representative looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. The hospital gown, the pale face, the baby. And yet there was no softening in her expression. "That doesn't change the rules," she replied. "The rules apply to everyone." The words hung in the air, heavy and cold. The man felt something shift inside him. Not anger. Not yet. More like disbelief. He had expected questions, maybe mild concern, maybe even an apology once the situation was clear. This was not that. "We're not blocking anything," he said calmly. "The stretcher will be gone shortly. Medical staff just left." "That's not my concern," the woman said. "My concern is compliance." She took a step closer. The woman on the stretcher flinched slightly. The baby stirred, letting out a small sound before settling again. The mother's heart pounded. She adjusted the blanket gently, her hands trembling just a little. "I really don't feel well," she said quietly. "Can this wait?" The HOA woman let out a short breath, clearly irritated. "I've already documented this situation. There will be consequences if it isn't corrected immediately." The man's jaw tightened, though his voice remained level. "We're dealing with a medical situation. Surely there's some understanding here." The woman tilted her head, studying him. "Understanding comes from following the rules." The silence stretched. Neighbors nearby pretended not to notice, though curtains shifted slightly in a few windows. Everyone was watching, but no one stepped in. The woman on the stretcher felt tears burn behind her eyes. Not from pain, but from exhaustion. She had imagined coming home would feel safe, that she could finally rest. Instead, she felt exposed, judged, small. "I just want to go inside," she whispered. The man nodded, turning back toward her. "You will." "Give me a second." He turned again to the HOA representative. "We're going to move inside now." "That won't be enough," she said sharply. "If this equipment isn't removed immediately, I'll be filing a formal complaint. Fines will follow." Something in her voice changed then. It wasn't just authority. It was satisfaction. The man studied her face carefully. He noted the way her eyes flicked briefly to the baby again, the way her lips pressed together as if holding back something more. "This is harassment," he said calmly. She laughed, a short, humorless sound. "It's enforcement." The woman on the stretcher swallowed hard. The baby shifted again, sensing the tension. She rocked gently, whispering soft sounds under her breath. "I don't want trouble," she said. "Please." The HOA woman leaned in just slightly, lowering her voice. "Then you should have planned better." The words felt like a slap. The man stepped forward again, this time unmistakably placing himself between them. His voice dropped, firm but controlled. "Step back." For a moment it looked like the woman might argue. Instead, she straightened, her expression hardening. "You're already on thin ice," she said. "I suggest you cooperate." She reached into her bag, pulling out a small notebook and pen. She began writing, her movements deliberate. "I'll be in touch," she added. "This isn't over." Then she turned and walked away, heels clicking sharply against the pavement. The driveway felt colder when she was gone. The woman on the stretcher finally let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the blanket again. "I didn't expect that," she whispered. The man knelt beside her, keeping his voice low. "You don't need to worry." "I'll handle it," she nodded, trusting him, though fear still lingered in her chest. The joy of coming home had been cracked, just slightly, by something she hadn't seen coming, as they slowly prepared to move inside. Neither of them knew that this brief encounter was only the beginning, that the threat had already been made, and that the quiet moment they had hoped for had been replaced by something else entirely. The baby slept on, unaware of rules, authority, or conflict. The world was still simple for now, but outside the house, the tension had already taken root, waiting to grow. The night after everything happened felt longer than it should have been. The house was quiet again, but this time the quiet did not feel peaceful. It felt heavy, like something unfinished was hanging in the air. The lights inside the house were dim, kept low so the baby could sleep. The woman lay on the bed with the newborn resting against her chest, her arm curved protectively around the tiny body. Every small movement from the baby made her heart jump. Every sound from outside made her tense. She kept replaying the scene in her head. The woman standing at the edge of the driveway, the sharp voice, the way the words had felt cold and uncaring. It was not just what had been said, but how it had been said. Like rules mattered more than people. Like the moment of bringing a child home meant nothing. The man sat in a chair near the bed, his back straight, his hands resting loosely on his knees. He looked calm on the outside, but his mind was far from quiet. He had spent the evening checking doors, windows, and lights more than once. Not out of fear, but out of habit. Old habits did not fade easily. Every so often he glanced at the woman and the baby. Seeing them safe, together, brought a sense of grounding. This was what mattered. Everything else could be dealt with. The woman finally broke the silence. "Do you think she'll come back?" He did not answer right away. He chose his words carefully. "Not tonight." She nodded slowly, though her shoulders remained tense. "I just didn't expect any of that." "No one would," he replied quietly. She shifted slightly, wincing as she adjusted her position. The pain from childbirth was still there, a dull ache that reminded her she needed rest. But her mind would not slow down. "I felt so small," she said after a moment, "like I had done something wrong just by coming home." He leaned forward slightly. "You didn't do anything wrong." "I know that," she said. "But it still felt that way," he nodded. Feelings did not always follow logic. He understood that. Outside, the neighborhood had settled into its normal nighttime rhythm. Porch lights glowed softly. Cars passed occasionally. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked once and then went quiet. The woman stared at the wall, her thoughts drifting. She wondered how many other families had felt that same pressure. How many people had been made to feel uncomfortable in their own homes because of rules enforced without empathy. The next morning came too quickly. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, gentle but persistent. The baby stirred, letting out a soft sound that pulled the woman out of a light, restless sleep. She blinked slowly, adjusting to the brightness. For a brief moment, she forgot everything. Then the memory returned. She looked down at the baby, who was stretching slightly, tiny hands moving under the blanket. A small smile touched her lips. Whatever happened next, this little life was worth everything. The man was already awake. He moved quietly through the house, preparing simple food, making sure everything was within reach for her. He had always been attentive, but now there was an added layer of care in every action. As the day went on, small, normal moments tried to push their way through. Feeding the baby, changing diapers, short naps that barely scratched the surface of exhaustion. These moments helped, but the tension never fully left. Around midday, there was a knock at the door. Both of them froze. The baby was sleeping again, finally settled. The woman's heart began to race. She looked toward the door, then at the man. He stood slowly, his movements controlled. "I'll handle it," he said softly. He opened the door just enough to see who was there. It was not the same woman from the day before, but it might as well have been. This one wore the same tight expression, the same posture of authority. A clipboard was tucked under her arm. "Good afternoon," she said. "I'm here regarding a reported violation." The man stepped outside, closing the door behind him. "This isn't a good time," he said. She glanced past him toward the house. "I just need a moment." "No," he replied calmly. "You don't." her lips pressed together. Failure to cooperate will result in, he cut her off, not raising his voice. Any communication regarding this matter can be put in writing. Do not disturb my family again. She looked taken aback for just a second, then recovered. That's not how this works. Is now, he said. She hesitated, clearly not used to resistance. You'll hear from us, she said finally. He nodded. I expect that. She turned and left without another word. Inside, the woman had been listening, holding her breath. When the door closed, she exhaled shakily. What happened? She asked. Nothing you need to worry about, he said, sitting beside her. I told them not to come back. Her eyes searched his face. And will they listen? He met her gaze. They will. But even as he said it, he knew things were not finished. People who relied on authority rarely liked being challenged, especially when they believed they were right. Over the next few days, small signs began to appear. A notice placed in the mailbox. A letter slipped under the door. Each one carefully worded, full of official language and vague threats. Fines, hearings, compliance deadlines. The woman read one letter and felt her chest tighten. This feels like bullying, she said. That's because it is, he replied. He began documenting everything. Dates, times, exact wording. He took photos, saved letters, made copies. He did not react emotionally. He prepared. Meanwhile, the woman focused on healing and caring for the baby. She tried to shield herself from the stress, but it was hard. Every time a car slowed outside the house, her stomach twisted. Every knock, even from a friendly neighbor, made her jump. One afternoon, a neighbor approached while the man was outside taking out the trash. I heard what happened, the neighbor said quietly. I'm sorry. The man nodded. Thank you. She's done this before, the neighbor added. Not the baby part, but she likes to push people. The man listened carefully. Did anyone ever push back? The neighbor shrugged. Most people don't want trouble. He understood that. But he also knew that silence only made things worse. Another letter arrived, more aggressive than the last. It mentioned enforcement action. Legal review. The woman's hands shook as she held it. What if they take this further? They won't, he said calmly. And if they try, they'll regret it. He was not threatening. He was stating a fact. He made a phone call that evening. Just one, short, direct. The next day, the letter stopped. A week passed. Then another. No visits, no notices, no warnings. The woman slowly began to relax. She slept a little deeper. She laughed again. The baby grew stronger each day, filling the house with small sounds that felt like hope. Then, one afternoon, there was another knock. This time, the man opened the door without hesitation. The same woman from the first day stood there. Her posture noticeably different. Her shoulders were less rigid. Her expression less sharp. I'm here to apologize, she said stiffly. He said nothing. There was a misunderstanding, she continued. The matter has been resolved internally. He waited. There will be no fines. No further action, she added. We regret any distress caused. He nodded once. Good. She lingered for a moment, clearly uncomfortable. Then she turned and left inside. The woman watched from the hallway, the baby in her arms. It's over. She asked. Yes, he said. It's over. She felt tears fill her eyes, this time from relief. That night, as they sat together in the quiet house, the tension finally lifted. The threat that had hovered over them dissolved. The woman leaned against him, careful not to wake the baby. Thank you, she whispered. He wrapped an arm around her. Always. Outside, the neighborhood looked the same as it always had. Neat, calm, orderly. But inside the house, something had changed. They had learned that peace was not something given by rules or associations. It was something protected. Sometimes quietly. Sometimes firmly. And this time, it had been protected fast. The days after the apology felt strange in a way that was hard to explain. On the surface, everything looked normal again. The letters stopped coming. No one stood at the edge of the driveway with a clipboard. No unfamiliar cars slowed down in front of the house. The neighborhood returned to its usual rhythm like nothing had ever happened. But inside the house, both of them knew something had changed. The woman woke up each morning with the baby resting beside her, the soft rise and fall of the tiny chest reminding her that this was real, that her life had truly shifted. She loved these quiet mornings the most, the light coming in through the window, the gentle sounds of the house waking up. These moments felt safe. But even in those moments, a small part of her stayed alert. She would listen for sounds outside, footsteps, doors closing, cars stopping. She hated that she felt this way, hated that a single confrontation had taken something from her that she hadn't even realized she valued so deeply. The feeling of being completely at ease in her own home. The man noticed it too. He noticed the way she paused before answering the door, even when it was just a delivery. The way she checked the window before stepping outside with the baby. He never said anything about it, but it stayed with him. He carried his own thoughts quietly. The apology had been short, too short. It had felt forced, like something done because it had to be done, not because anyone truly understood the harm that had been caused. He trusted actions more than words, and so far, the action had simply been silence. Silence could mean peace, or it could mean waiting. One afternoon, while the baby slept in a small bassinet near the couch, the woman sat scrolling through messages on her phone. Friends and family checked in, asking how she was feeling, how the baby was doing. She replied with simple answers: good, tired, happy. She did not mention the HOA situation to most of them. She didn't want to relive it, but one message caught her attention. It was from a neighbor she barely knew, someone who lived a few houses down. The message was polite, almost careful. I hope you and the baby are doing well. I just wanted to say you're not alone. If you ever need anything, please let me know. The woman stared at the message for a long moment. Then she typed back a thank you. It seemed small, but it mattered. It reminded her that not everyone in the neighborhood was watching with judgment. Some people were simply kind. Later that day, the man stepped outside to check the mail. As he walked back toward the house, another neighbor approached him. This one looked nervous, glancing around as if worried someone might be listening. I heard things got intense, the neighbor said quietly. The man nodded once. It did. I just wanted to say, that woman has caused problems before. A lot of people just don't want to deal with it. The man studied the neighbor's face. Why? The neighbor sighed. Because it's easier to stay quiet. Because people don't want to be targeted. The man thanked him and went inside, but the words stayed with him, staying quiet. Not wanting trouble, he understood that instinct. But he also knew what happened when everyone chose silence. That evening, after the baby was settled and the house grew quiet again, the woman brought it up. Do you think she'll really leave us alone? She asked. He didn't rush his answer. I think she'll be careful. That's not the same thing, she said. No, he agreed. It's not. She shifted on the couch, careful of her still healing body. I don't want to live like I'm waiting for the next problem. He looked at her, really looked at her. The exhaustion, the strength. The way she still put the baby first in every moment. You won't, he said. I won't let that happen. She nodded, trusting him, even if she wasn't sure what that meant yet. A few days later, notice appeared on the community board near the entrance of the neighborhood. Most people passed it without much thought, but the man stopped to read it. It announced an upcoming HOA meeting. Routine agenda. Community concerns. Open floor discussion. He stared at the notice for a long time. That night he mentioned it to the woman. There's a meeting coming up. Her shoulders tensed immediately. Do we have to go? No, he said. But I might. She looked at him, surprised. Why? Because what happened shouldn't happen again. To us, or to anyone else. She was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded slowly. I'll support whatever you decide. The day of the meeting arrived quietly. The woman stayed home with the baby, watching the clock more than she meant to. The man arrived early, sitting near the back of the room. The space was filled with folding chairs, fluorescent lights. In the low hum of conversation, he recognized the woman immediately, She sat near the front, her posture straight, her expression neutral. She did not look at him. The meeting began with routine updates. Lawn care, maintenance, budget items. The kind of things that usually bored people enough to keep them quiet. Then came the open. Floored, the man stood. He did not raise his voice. He did not point fingers. He spoke clearly, calmly, and directly. He described the situation. Not with emotion, but with facts. The timing, the behavior, the impact. As he spoke, the room grew quiet. He talked about respect, about discretion, about remembering that people were more than rule violations. He did not mention threats. He did not exaggerate. He didn't need to. When he finished, he sat back down. No one spoke for a moment. Then, one by one, others began to speak. Stories surfaced. Not identical, but familiar. Overreach, intimidation, pressure. The woman at the front shifted uncomfortably. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that something had changed. The board members promised to review enforcement practices, to address complaints differently, to ensure no one felt targeted during vulnerable moments. The man left without saying another word. At home, the woman listened quietly as he told her what happened. She held the baby close, feeling something she hadn't felt in days. Relief. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood felt different. Not perfect, but lighter. The woman began taking short walks with the baby. At first, she stayed close to the house. Then, a little farther. Neighbors smiled. Some stopped to talk. A few apologized for not speaking up sooner. The woman didn't hold resentment. She understood fear. She understood exhaustion. She understood how easy it was to stay quiet when you just wanted peace. One afternoon, she passed the same spot where the confrontation had happened. The driveway looked ordinary now, just concrete and grass. But she paused there for a moment. Taking a slow breath, she realized something then. She was no longer afraid. Not because nothing bad could happen, but because she knew she was not powerless. Inside the house that evening, as the baby slept peacefully, the man and woman sat together, talking quietly. "I'm proud of you," she said. He shook his head. "We did it together," she smiled. "Yes, we did." Outside, the neighborhood settled into another quiet night. This time, the quiet felt earned. The threat that once lingered had lost its power. Not because it had been ignored, but because it had been faced, and for the first time since bringing their baby home. The woman slept without listening for footsteps outside the door. The first real test of peace did not arrive with noise or confrontation. It arrived quietly, disguised as normal days stacking on top of each other. Mornings turned into afternoons, afternoons into evenings. The baby grew a little heavier in the woman's arms. Feeding schedules changed. Sleep came in short pieces, but it came. Life moved forward, step by careful step. The woman began to feel stronger in her body. The soreness faded slowly. She could move around the house without wincing. She could stand a little longer, walk a little farther. Each small improvement felt like progress, not just physically, but emotionally too. She started to believe that the worst was truly behind them, but the man did not relax completely. He had learned long ago that calm after conflict did not always mean resolution. Sometimes it meant regrouping. Sometimes it meant someone on the other side was deciding their next move. He did not share these thoughts with the woman. She had carried enough weight already. Instead, he kept watch quietly. He noticed small things. A car that passed the house more than once. A pause near the mailbox. A look held a second too long. None of it was dramatic. None of it could be proven. But patterns mattered. One afternoon, while the woman sat on the couch feeding the baby, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from the HOA. Her heart skipped. She stared at the screen, unsure if she wanted to open it. "Can you check this?" she asked, holding the phone out to the man. He took it without hesitation. His face remained neutral as he read. "It's a request," he said calmly. "They want a meeting, Her shoulders stiffened. About what? They didn't say, he replied. Just a discussion. She looked down at the baby, who had finished feeding and now rested quietly. I don't like that. Neither do I, he said. But it doesn't mean trouble. Last time, everything started with something small, she said. He nodded. Which is why we'll handle it properly. They talked quietly that evening, weighing options. Ignore the request. Respond in writing. Agree to a meeting with conditions. The woman worried about stress, about confrontation, about being pulled back into something she wanted to forget. I don't want to feel like I'm being judged again, she said. You won't be, he said firmly. Not on my watch. They decided he would attend alone. Neutral location. Clear boundaries. Written record. The day of the meeting, the woman stayed home with the baby. She tried to distract herself with small tasks. Folding laundry. Cleaning bottles. Organizing drawers that didn't really need organizing. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the same fear. What if this wasn't over? The man arrived early again. The room felt familiar now. The same chairs. The same lights. But the energy was different. Less confident. More cautious. Several board members were present. The same woman sat at the table, her posture stiff, her eyes avoiding his. The meeting began with polite words and careful phrasing. The board spoke about community harmony, about misunderstandings, about moving forward. The man listened without interrupting. Then it was his turn. He spoke plainly. He explained how the situation had affected his family. Not emotionally, but realistically. The stress. The disruption. The impact on a recovering mother and a newborn. He made one thing very clear. No one from this association is to approach my wife again. Ever. There was a pause. One board member nodded. That will be noted. And one more thing, he added. Any future communication goes through legal channels. In writing, the woman at the table shifted in her seat. The meeting ended without argument. No raised voices. No threats. Just a quiet understanding that lines had been drawn. When he returned home, the woman searched his face. It's done, he said. For real this time? She let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for weeks. Days passed. Then weeks, no emails. No notices. No surprise visits. The woman slowly reclaimed pieces of herself that had been pushed aside. She laughed more. She invited a close friend over for tea. She sat on the porch with the baby in the evenings. Watching the sky change colors, she began to feel something she hadn't felt since before the birth. Normal, one evening. As the baby slept, she said something that surprised even her. I want to go to the park. The man looked at her. Tomorrow? She nodded. Tomorrow. The next day, they packed a small bag and drove a short distance to a quiet local park. The woman held the baby close as they walked slowly along the path. She felt eyes on her, but when she looked up, people smiled. Some waved. Some nodded kindly. No one questioned her presence. No one pointed out rules. No one made her feel unwelcome. She realized then how deeply the earlier experience had affected her. How it had made her doubt things that should have been simple. As they sat on a bench, the man watched her carefully. He saw the tension ease from her shoulders. He saw her breathe more freely. This is good, he said. She smiled. It really is. Back in the neighborhood, life continued quietly. The seasons began to change. Leaves shifted color. Air grew cooler. The baby grew stronger, louder, more curious. One afternoon, a letter arrived. Not from the HOA, but from a neighbor. A simple, handwritten note. Thank you for speaking up. Things feel different now. The woman read it twice. It mattered, she said softly. Yes, he replied. It did. Another neighbor stopped by a few days later bringing a small gift for the baby. They chatted briefly on the porch. Nothing about rules. Nothing about violations. Just life. The woman felt a sense of belonging she hadn't expected. Then, one evening as they prepared for bed, she asked a question that had been sitting quietly in her mind. Why didn't you tell me how bad it could have gotten? He paused. Because you didn't need that weight. She considered this. I trust you, I know, he said. That's why I take it seriously. She reached for his hand. Thank you for protecting us. He squeezed her hand gently. Always. As the weeks turned into months, the story faded into memory. Not forgotten, but no longer sharp. It became something they had survived, not something they lived inside. The woman slept better. She stopped checking the window before stepping outside. She answered the door without fear. The man relaxed too, just a little. Enough to enjoy the quiet without scanning it for threats. One evening, as they sat together watching the baby play on the floor, the woman said, I used to think strength meant being loud. He looked at her. And now? Now I think it means knowing when to stand firm and when to let go. He smiled. Outside, the neighborhood lights came on one by one. The same houses. The same streets. But something beneath the surface had shifted. Boundaries had been set. Respect had been restored. And the family, once shaken during their most vulnerable moment, had found their footing again. They did not know what the future would bring. No one ever did. But they knew one thing. They would face it together. And this time, they would not be caught off guard. Time has a strange way of softening things without fully erasing them. Months passed, then more. The baby was no longer a quiet bundle that slept through most of the day. There were curious eyes now, small sounds that turned into laughter, hands that reached for everything within sight. The house felt fuller than it ever had before. Louder too, but in a good way. The kind of noise that reminded everyone inside that life was moving forward. The woman often found herself sitting on the floor, watching the baby play, thinking about how different everything felt compared to those first weeks. She remembered how fragile she had felt then, not just physically, but emotionally. How one unexpected confrontation had shaken her sense of safety at a time when she needed it most. Now, as she watched the baby crawl clumsily across the rug, she felt grounded in a way she hadn't before. The man noticed the change too. He saw how she moved more confidently, how she spoke without hesitation when neighbors stopped by to talk. She smiled more easily now. The tension that once lived in her shoulders was gone. He knew it hadn't disappeared overnight. Healing rarely worked that way. It had taken time, patience, and quiet reassurance. Life in the neighborhood settled into something close to peaceful routine. The HOA faded into the background where it belonged. Notices came and went, but they were general now, impersonal, handled through email like they should have been from the start. No one stood at the edge of the driveway anymore. No one crossed lines. One afternoon, while the woman sat outside with the baby on a blanket in the yard, a neighbor walked over. Not cautiously this time, but openly, with a friendly smile. I just wanted to say, the neighbor began, things really are better now. The woman looked up surprised. Better. Yes, the neighbor said. People feel less watched, less pressured. The woman nodded slowly. She hadn't realized how far the effects had reached. She had been focused on her own family, on surviving those early days. But sometimes standing up, even quietly, created ripples. That night, she talked about it with the man. I didn't do anything, she said. He looked at her gently. You did more than you think. You existed. You didn't disappear, she considered his words. Maybe that was true. Maybe simply refusing to be pushed aside had mattered. As the baby grew, new routines replaced old fears. Early mornings filled with soft light and babbling sounds. Walks around the block became a regular habit. The woman no longer checked over her shoulder. She waved at neighbors. She stopped to chat. She felt, finally, like she belonged again. One day, while sorting through old papers, she came across the original HOA letter, the one that had started it all. Her chest tightened briefly as she held it. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in the recycling. I don't need this anymore, she said quietly. The man watched her do it, a small smile on his face. Seasons changed. The baby took first steps, unsteady but determined. The woman clapped, tears in her eyes, laughing through them. The man caught the baby when balance failed, lifting them up high. Filling the room with laughter, those moments mattered more than anything that had happened before. Occasionally, the woman would think back to the HOA representative, not with anger, but with a strange sense of distance. She wondered what drove someone to act that way. Control, perhaps. Fear of losing it. Whatever it was, it no longer had power over her life. One evening, as the family sat together after dinner, the woman spoke softly. "I don't feel angry anymore," she said. The man nodded. "That's good, I feel." "Stronger," she added. He smiled. "You are?" The baby babbled happily between them, unaware of the conversation, but very much the reason for it. The neighborhood itself continued to look the same from the outside. Trim lawns, quiet streets. But beneath that surface, something had shifted. People spoke more openly at meetings. Concerns were raised without fear. Rules were enforced with more care. The man attended fewer meetings now. He didn't need to. His message had been heard. One afternoon, the woman passed the HOA representative on the sidewalk. The encounter was brief. A nod. No words. No tension. Just two people moving on with their lives. The woman felt nothing in that moment. No fear, no anger. Just neutrality. And that felt like freedom. Later, as she pushed the stroller home, she thought about how far she had come. About how easy it would have been to shrink back, to let fear dictate her actions. She was glad she hadn't. That evening, after the baby was asleep, she and the man sat together quietly. "Do you ever regret how you handled it?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, I regret that it happened at all. But not that I stood firm." She nodded. "I'm glad you did." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the familiar sounds of their home. The hum of appliances. The distant noise of the neighborhood. Settling in for the night, the story of what happened became something they shared only when asked. Not a source of drama, but a reminder. A reminder that boundaries mattered. That respect mattered. The baby slept peacefully upstairs, dreaming of nothing more complicated than warmth and comfort. As the woman turned off the lights that night, she paused for a moment, looking around the room. She felt gratitude. For her family. For the quiet. For the strength she had found in herself. Life was not perfect. It never would be. But it was good. And it was theirs. And that was enough. The story did not truly end when things became quiet. Quiet is never an ending. It is a space. A pause where life decides what comes next. For this family, that pause, slowly filled with ordinary days, small changes, moments that carried more meaning than they realized at the time. The baby was growing fast now, not just in size but in awareness. Eyes followed movement across the room. Small hands reached out, curious and eager. Laughter came easily, bright and sudden, filling the house in ways that made everything else feel smaller and less important. The woman often found herself stopping in the middle of whatever she was doing just to watch, to listen, to remind herself that this was real and that they had made it through something that once felt overwhelming. She remembered the early days after coming home, how she had moved slowly, carefully, afraid of pain, afraid of conflict, afraid of doing something wrong. Now, she moved with confidence. She trusted her body again. She trusted her instincts. She trusted her right to exist peacefully in her own space. The man noticed these changes quietly. He had always believed that strength often showed itself in small ways, in how someone carried themselves, in how they breathed, in how they no longer flinched at shadows that once felt threatening. He saw that strength in her now, and it filled him with a deep sense of pride. Life outside the house continued too. The neighborhood evolved in subtle ways. Conversations between neighbors became more open. People lingered a little longer when they talked. Smiles came easier. There was still structure, still rules, but there was also more understanding, more humanity. One afternoon, while the woman walked with the stroller down the street, she passed a group of neighbors chatting near a driveway. They waved her over. She hesitated for a moment, then smiled and joined them. The conversation was simple. Whether kids, daily life, no one mentioned the past. No one brought up rules or authority. She felt included, not watched. As she walked home later, she realized something important. The fear she once carried was gone. Not because the world had become perfect, but because she had learned she could face discomfort and survive it. That knowledge stayed with her. The man continued to handle things quietly in the background. He stayed informed, stayed prepared, but he no longer felt the need to be on constant alert. He trusted the boundaries that had been set. He trusted that if those boundaries were ever tested again, he knew exactly how to respond. One evening, after the baby had finally fallen asleep, the woman sat at the table sorting through old photos on her phone. Pictures from the hospital, from the first days at home. She paused on one image taken just after they arrived. Her face looked tired, vulnerable, but hopeful. "I don't recognize that version of myself," she said softly. The man looked over her shoulder. "You were strong then too," he said. "I didn't feel like it," she replied. "Strength doesn't always feel strong," he said. "Sometimes it just feels like surviving." She nodded, understanding now in a way she hadn't before. As the baby grew, new challenges replaced old ones. Sleepless nights returned in different forms. Teething, growth spurts, small illnesses that felt bigger than they were. Through it all, the woman learned to trust herself. She asked for help when she needed it. She rested when she could. She stopped trying to be perfect. The man supported her in quiet, steady ways. He listened. He stepped in when needed. He reminded her that she didn't have to carry everything alone. Occasionally, the memory of that first confrontation surfaced in conversation. Usually when someone shared a similar experience. The woman listened, offered understanding, but no longer felt pulled back into the emotion of it. It had become part of her story, not the center of it. One day, a community event was announced. A small gathering at the local park. Food trucks, games, a chance for neighbors to connect. The woman hesitated when she saw the notice. Large groups still made her nervous sometimes. "We don't have to go," the man said. "I want to," she replied after a moment. "I just want to feel normal." They went together. The park was filled with families, children running and laughing, music playing softly in the background. The woman held the baby close at first, scanning the crowd out of habit. Then she relaxed. People smiled, complimented the baby, made small talk. At one point, she caught sight of the HOA representative across the park. Their eyes met briefly. There was no confrontation, no tension, just recognition. Then the woman looked away and continued her conversation. Later, as they walked home, the woman felt lighter. "That felt good," she said. "Yes," he agreed. It did. The months continued to pass, each one adding distance between the present and the fear of the past. The baby said first words, took first real steps. Each milestone reminded the woman how quickly life moved forward. She sometimes thought about other parents who might find themselves in similar situations. Vulnerable moments disrupted by unnecessary conflict. She hoped they would find support, that they would know they were not wrong for protecting their peace. The man shared those thoughts. "People forget that rules are meant to serve people, not control them," he said one evening. She nodded. "And sometimes people need to be reminded." As time went on, the story of what happened became something they told less often. Not because it didn't matter, but because life had filled in the space it once occupied. New memories took its place. Happier ones. One quiet night, after the baby had been put to bed, the woman stepped outside onto the porch. The air was cool. The street was calm. She stood there for a long moment. Listening to the familiar sounds of the neighborhood, she thought about how far she had come. About how she had learned to trust herself again. About how her home had once felt threatened. And how now it felt safe. The man joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You okay?" he asked. She smiled. "Yes, I really am." They stood there together, not saying much, not needing to. The quiet felt different now. Not heavy, not tense, just peaceful. Inside, the baby slept soundly, unaware of the journey that had taken place before they could even remember it. Unaware of the strength it had taken to protect the calm they now enjoyed, the story did not end with a dramatic moment or a final confrontation. It ended the way most real stories do, with growth, with understanding, with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can face challenges and come out stronger. And as the lights in the house went out one by one, there was no fear waiting in the dark, only rest, only the promise of another ordinary day, and the knowledge that ordinary days were something to be grateful for.